Perkins. Thank you, Henry. And we are very pleased to be supporting the Business Resource Committee and the broader business community across the Mobile region to drive that leadership towards a more resilient economy with such a foundation of incredible ecological, geological, and human assets. And so today we're going to dive into the world of the circular economy. We all know that in nature and natural systems, there is no waste. And humans were doing a great job of producing a lot of waste. So we need to figure out how to close that circle. And the business community in Mobile has shown a deep interest in the concept of waste to value or circularity. And so today we have two fantastic speakers to help ground us in what's happening in circularity globally with John Schmea from GreenBiz. He leads their circularity program. They have an incredible annual conference on circularity, which just wrapped up. So John will give us a grounding in circularity and the business opportunities there. And then we're going to have NotPlow with us. I've talked about them for months with all of you who've been in our discussions because I'm so excited about this company. Rodrigo Garcia Gonzalez is co-founder and co-CEO of NotPlow. He's actually calling in from London. And I should say that John from GreenBiz is calling in from his vacation. So we have an incredible dedication to this issue. And so thank you both for joining us and really looking forward to this conversation. So John Schmea is Vice President of Circularity at GreenBiz Group. And his topic is redefining sustainability, exploring circular business solutions. And John has a background as at Steelcase. He has a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from the University of St. Thomas and a PhD in Inorganic Chemistry from UC San Diego. He joined Steelcase as their environmental chemist and then as a sustainable design leader. And he joined Andersen Windows and Doors, where he served as corporate sustainability manager and was responsible for product lifecycle assessments, material ingredient transparency, and preparing Andersen for the future in the circular economy. And he's now the VP of Circularity at GreenBiz Group. GreenBiz is the largest business convener in the world and has an incredible series of conferences throughout the year. So with no further ado, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome, John.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I hope everyone can hear me okay. This is a little bit of a awesome. This is a little bit of a challenge because I'm used to I'm used to presenting with two screens, and today I have one, and I'm struggling to get it to actually share. Hold on just a second.
Thank you.
While I'm trying to share, I will say that as Amy said, I have a pretty extensive experience in corporate sustainability before I got here to GreenBiz, and I have a background in chemistry, so I'm bringing a little bit of all that to this presentation today, and I'm on vacation, so if somebody comes into the room, that's why. So let's just get right into it. So as we think about the need for a circular economy, I'm hoping you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
I like to think about this idea of the big why. So if you look at the history of humankind, about 100 billion people, to our best estimate, have lived and died on this planet. We currently have a bit more than 8 billion living. And depending on the estimate you go with and how well we change our economy over the next 100 years or so, to make this planet livable into the future, we have between 6 and 100 trillion people left to be born. So that's a lot of people, a lot of needs for resources. And that makes it sort of guides us towards this idea of right now we live in an almost entirely linear economy. More than 90% of everything we extract from the planet and make into progress gets wasted after one useful lifetime. That's anywhere from seconds, if you're thinking of packaging, to years, if you're thinking of building products, decades, maybe in some cases. So basically right now we are taking from the earth, we are making products, and we are wasting all of that material that we are taking from the planet. why is this important? Well, we are taking too much too fast. There are too many people on this planet to support this type of economy. This graph shows what we call Earth Overshoot Day and the trend line over the last 50 years. Earth Overshoot Day represents the day and the year that we have extracted more biological resources from the planet than it can sustainably rejuvenate. And as you see, we're getting close to the point where we're only about halfway through the year when we've reached that number on our planet right now. So we have a lot of work to do. This is getting worse and worse over the years, and we need to fix it. Another interesting graphic to me is this periodic table of endangered elements. As a chemist, I spent a lot of time looking at this periodic table for a lot of years, but never thought about it from this perspective. If we look here, we have many elements that have limited availability and future risk to supply. We have also many elements that are highlighted in red here that are in serious threat in the next 100 years. And interestingly enough, a lot of those elements include the ones that we're going to need for a clean economy transition, things like zinc, indium, gallium, silver, and then some that have a rising threat are also important for our transition. So as we think about transitioning to a cleaner economy, being a more sustainable society, we also have to think about the mineral needs that's going to require. And if I could get on my soapbox for 1 second before I move on, I'd like to point out that helium is red here. Helium is a critical element for scientific research. We don't know how to make it, and there's a limited supply on this planet. So next time you're thinking about getting a helium-filled balloon for a birthday party, think twice, because helium is something that we really, really need to continue to advance scientific research. And right now we're filling balloons with it, and it's escaping into the atmosphere. All right. So what are the simple goals for a circular economy then? First is to eliminate waste and pollution. Second is to recirculate materials at their highest and best value indefinitely. And third, and often forgotten, is to regenerate nature. Of course, nothing can be quite that simple when we're thinking about a transition for the whole economy. So this is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation butterfly diagram that was developed at about, I think, 2012 or so, and has been updated since then. When we look at this, we can see two different sides of this graphic. One side is the sort of biological inputs side, and we're going to hear a lot more about that in the second half of this from Napla. The second half is, or the right side is the technical inputs, the metals, the minerals, the wood, well, not wood, sorry, the metals, minerals, glass, things like that. And what we see is that there's a bunch of different cycles here, right? It's not just as simple as recycling or creating products that last forever, right? We need to develop new business models. We need to develop new infrastructure, and we need to think differently about how we make and use products. This includes sharing, maintaining, remanufacturing, eventually recycling when something can't be kept in its highest and best use anymore. And on the other side of the graphic, there's a lot of opportunity around things like composting, materials from chemicals, things like seaweed, which we'll hear about, and more sustainable farming, collection, fishing, etc. So this is a complicated picture that we have to look at to try to get to a circular economy. And I'm going to end with this idea of what I think of as the spectrum of opportunity. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. And if you look at this diagram, on either end, we've got things that I feel are a little bit more difficult to make an immediate case for the circular economy, and therefore might need regulation, some sort of tax incentive or structure to push us towards a circular economy. So on the left side, we see the sort of fast products, things like packaging, kids' toys, in many cases, footwear and fashion. These can be challenging to turn into a circular economy from where we are now, because the materials are of low value. So it's hard to make the business case to recycle them, reuse them, refurbish them, repurpose them into something new. So a lot of those have one lifetime that's relatively short, and then they end up as waste. On the other end of this graphic, we have things like furniture and building products. They're not necessarily a challenge from a value perspective, but they are a challenge in that they can be used for decades. The original manufacturer might lose track of them, not be able to get them back, not be able to secure them as a source for new products in the future. So the challenge on this right side is not necessarily value. It's more about the infrequent use over decades and decades that can make it challenging to make the business case for a circular economy. And then in the middle, we've got some things that might be a bit easier to transition in the short term. Things like consumer electronics, automobiles, heavy machinery. Auto and heavy machinery are already doing a pretty good job, actually, of being circular in that they're often repaired, reused, resold. They have sharing models and leasing models that they operate under. Consumer electronics have the benefit that a lot of the materials within them are of high value and are getting more and more expensive over time. So if we can keep those materials in circulation, we can make a strong business case for a circular economy in consumer electronics. So this is just something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. And on either end of the spectrum, basically, like I said, we either need regulation, tax incentives, something, or some real innovation to make these things fit into the circular economy in the short term. As we think then again about the circular economy, we should also be thinking about the different interventions that we can make to keep materials at their highest and best use indefinitely. This is the waste hierarchy that I tend to prefer. If we look at the top of this funnel, we're rethinking and redesigning our products to fit more into a circular economy. We're reducing the overall number of materials we use and the types of materials. The material palette is being simplified. We're reusing products as long as possible. Once we get into the middle tier where we're doing things like recycling, composting, and material recovery, it gets more challenging. We have infrastructure needs there. Recycling often leads to downcycling of products. Composting infrastructure is definitely not where we need it to be at this moment. And things tend to escape from the system once we get out of the top part of the funnel. So this is where we have leakage of things like plastics and pollution into the environment. So really what we want to do as we're thinking about transitioning to a circular economy is stay in the top rungs of this waste hierarchy. And that requires companies to think differently, governments to think differently, and everyone to sort of change the way we do business, which is part of what makes this a big challenge. I'm going to go through these really quick, and rethinking and redesigning, we've got policy, we've got a shift in materials, we've got things as maybe not simple, but well known as zero waste to landfill facilities, right? So as we're manufacturing, we should be wasting less and redesigning those processes. When it comes to reducing, we can simplify material palettes, we can lightweight, we can electrify a lot of products. When it comes to industrial waste, automotive, heavy machinery, the built environment, electrification can reduce overall waste in the system in the long term. We've also got reuse and resale are a big part of a future circular economy. Definitely repair, and we need to start thinking about ways to repair things that aren't just automobiles and heavy machinery, right? How do we repair our consumer electronics and keep them in circulation longer? How do we repair our clothing, our shoes, our toys, etc.? And finally, of course, recycling is going to be an important part as well. And with that, I think I've used all my time. I have my email address here if anybody wants to reach out. And I will turn it back over to Amy, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, John. So I have a question to start with, and I did say to folks who are listening to please put any questions in the chat. So I have a question, just could you give us an example of some of the companies? What are some of those companies who are being created to fill that gap or who are operating in a circular approach? Do you have some examples for us?
Yeah, so you're thinking about new companies, new innovative companies that are stepping in to help out. Yeah. Well, in some cases, it's companies that already exist changing their business models. One good example that I can think of is Republic Services. A lot of people know them as a very large waste management company around the US and I believe in Canada. They've actually started to build their own recycling centers that they're co-locating next to their material recovery facilities. And this provides them the opportunity to know exactly what's coming out of their separation facilities, exactly how to sort it to optimize recycling of packaging and products like that. So that's an existing business that's doing a lot right now to change. You've also got new innovative businesses sprouting up all over the economy. When I think about things like electrification and consumer electronics, you've got companies like Li-Cycle and Redwood Materials that have really developed new ways to recycle lithium-ion batteries, which is going to be a huge deal within the next decade as we start to take all these batteries out of things like automobiles, home electrification systems, et cetera. Those products are going to need to be recycled so that we can economically keep those materials in circulation. Another one of my favorites is this company, Campston Rather. They just built a new facility in Southern California where they have a really innovative physical separation process to recycle printed circuit boards, which have long been challenging to recycle, and the infrastructure was not there to do it. And then, of course, I think we'll hear a lot more from Rodrigo about some of the innovations on the material side, right? The seaweeds, the biomaterials, the composting facilities, recycling of textiles is starting to really take hold. So, yeah, there's so many out there. It's hard to pinpoint.
That's
Pinpoint
great.
one.
I remember when Ford Motor Company announced their new battery manufacturing facilities in Kentucky and Tennessee. They talked about their deal not only with their Korean battery manufacturing partner, SK, but they also announced the partnership with Redwood Materials to source the recycled materials, lithium, et cetera, from the battery recycling that Redwood Materials is doing. So it's exciting to see some of that market pull for those recycled materials.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting about that too is as we think about things like geopolitical concerns, sourcing challenges over the future, if we already have all these batteries on in our own countries, in our own land, we should be recycling them just to try to secure sourcing of those materials in the future as well.
Great question just came in, probably from Henry, it looks like. What are challenges with logistics in this space? Transportation costs outweighing the carbon or energy value of that reuse?
Yeah, I think, that's a really good question. We've gotten so good at getting products to people for the first sale, right? UPS, FedEx, Amazon, they all know how to do this really well, the US Postal Service. But we have not optimized the system whatsoever for returns. And this is the case for even product returns because somebody ordered it and doesn't want it, right? So many of those end up in warehouses and eventually being wasted. So I think the biggest challenges are just how do you take advantages of the empty trucks and trains and planes that are already returning from shipping all this stuff in the first place? So, right, there's sort of a technology challenge of making sure you're getting the best use out of those return trips. And then there's probably a whole bunch of innovation around, do things need to be shipped back to the original place? Or can we develop local economies that can handle this stuff, right? So there's some of this going on. This is a small example, but one that I love in Phoenix, I think it's Goodwill of Phoenix, Goodwill of Arizona. I can't remember what their official name is, but they're doing some of their own sorting and recycling right there in Phoenix. So things that need to be, recycled, reused, refurbished, they can sort it, figure out the next best use for it right there in the city instead of sending it across the nation or across the world for recycling. So I think the biggest challenges are really that shipping costs money and we're not taking good advantage of return trips with empty shipping right now. I know if anybody's interested, BNSF, the railway system, is really interested in being a reverse logistics partner. They're really interested in building that part of their business, which could be a breakthrough, right? The rail system is low carbon, efficient, runs all over the country. There's some really good opportunities there if we can take advantage of the companies that actually want to participate.
Definitely. Actually, the Port of Mobile has invested a great deal in extending the rail down to the port as part an efficiency and also a decarbonization opportunity for the port to drive that efficiency and reduction in emissions. And so it's well positioned, the region, to take advantage of that. I see Don Bates on here, and Don's a local waste hero in my view, and has been doing a lot of work with the Osprey Initiative, his company, to do waste recovery. And so, Don, if you have any questions or comments, I'd welcome them in the chat, or even unmute yourself and jump in, just because we've got a little time, and I know you're really experienced. Don is one of the innovators I've met in the Mobile region who's solving for some of these problems that we see, some of these challenges, and creating an opportunity. So, Don, did you have a question?
Yeah. Well, just great. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I think, John, like you hit on a lot of the points. And I think there's a sub network already working here in Mobile. There's a lot of great partners. It's all partnership understanding. You know, a nonprofit has a hard time understanding the logistics of getting an 18-wheeler down the road. But Mobile just has this knack of partnering, respecting each other's footprint. So some calls just the other day. We have a client that started with an email from PEP that Jennifer put out, and they've got about 18-wheelers of a very high grade HDPE that the logistics don't get it. And so we made a few phone calls, and actually we're giving a proposal right now to bale that locally, get that material recycled. You know, we're going to be able to pay for about 40% of that cost of that project through the value of the HDPE, which is the highest valued. So
Yeah.
I could, again, Amy, I know I got to keep my hook on because I love this, but this is exactly what's going on. And the innovation through partnership is really where this is. I have a need, you have a product. How do we come together while we set some goals through true footprint of what we're trying to do? So pretty exciting. Glad you're here, John. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and one, this is one of the things I say in almost every presentation I give is that there's no one company that can do this alone, right? It's going to take partnerships both up and down the value chain, and maybe the most difficult is across sectors, right? If you're in the apparel sector, you should be collaborating pre-competitive collaboration with your competitors to figure out how you can build the systems to keep these things in use. I saw a question come in about municipal actions. You know, you just touched on it, Don, but there's so many good ones going on. One of my favorite examples is what's happening in Seattle. The city of Seattle is pushing towards more reuse of things like, cups and foodware at venues and within businesses. And so they're actually coordinating the infrastructure build out of cleaning facilities and logistics, and working with the actual reuse companies that have the products that they need to try to build a citywide plan. And I think when it comes to things like reuse, especially for packaging, that may be the best way we get there, right? Is through citywide, countywide action. So there's a lot of good examples of that, and there's a lot of cities that are sort of leading the way on how to reuse, especially the things that used to be single use and throwaway materials.
Definitely. We got another question in from about the ag and food sector around circularity, given food waste is such a massive challenge and cause of greenhouse gas emissions and just wasteful. Do you have any thought, John, there?
Yeah, this is
Or
one of one of the parts that I think is really underdeveloped as we're thinking about the circular economy, or just not focused on enough, right? There's some initiatives like Refed that is working with people like retailers and restaurants to try to reduce food waste at those sources. As we know, there's a lot of food wasted in the fields, and I think we need to figure out a better way to not only reduce that number, but also make sure that the food that is wasted in the fields is going to the right places. And ultimately, I think a lot of this comes down to, do we have the infrastructure to do it? Right now, we don't have the composting infrastructure we need to properly deal with food waste, especially not in North America. And we also have a food system that isn't really set up at the moment for reducing waste. So I think there's a lot of change that needs to happen in the way people think about food waste, the way, the agricultural sector, the grocery sector, frankly, consumers think about how to deal with food. I think there's a lot of change there needed, and I wish I knew more about that topic. But oddly, it's one of the ones that we have trouble when we put our sessions together for our conference. It's one of the ones we have trouble finding people to talk about
Well,
this
I
topic.
would say that actually today I have my delivery of my Misfits Market, and Misfits Market takes those, not perfect, but still incredibly delicious and nutritious produce and then other products, food products, and you can go online and you can have a regular delivery, or you can order whenever you need it. And I get incredible produce, and it looks to me perfect. And it's sad that that's potentially waste. And so as consumers, it's an opportunity to have that convenience of delivery and also be maybe diverting a bit of that waste out of the waste stream. So it feels like with we put some of the links in the chat there, compostnow.org around composting. And of course we can all do that. And there's now machines where you can even compost in your, apartment. So you don't need a full yard to be able to compost. And so things are getting easier, but yeah, a lot of innovation needed for sure and scaling up. So thank you so much, John. Do you have any final words for us? And then I'm going to turn it over to Notpla.
No, I hope the presentation wasn't too disjointed. If people want to reach out, please feel free. I will also put my email
Great.
in the chat here for folks.
Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate you taking the time on your vacation and providing that overview. I think it's a great foundation for our next speaker. And I also highly recommend all of Green Biz's conferences. So definitely go to greenbiz.com and check those out. It's a great place to go and get introduced. And I know that Steve Stewart and others have been at some of the Green Biz conferences over from the Mobile region. So definitely recommend those. Thank you again. So now it's my pleasure of introducing Rodrigo Garcia Gonzalez. He's a designer, architect, and inventor. He's the co-founder and co-CEO of Notpla. Notpla is a startup that aims to eliminate plastic packaging. Their first product, Ojo, is an edible bubble made of seaweed that can contain water or any other liquids. You may see runners with the packets as they're running, etc. So it's been used in several sports events in the London Marathon and others. And they won Prince William's £1 million Earthshot Prize in 2022 is how I came across them at the Earthshot event last September. Was incredibly excited about the potential of Notpla. So we're talking about the circular economy today. So why is seaweed-based packaging circular? Well, certainly it's dealing with the plastic issue, but also when we have things like sargassum, which is being overproduced thanks to overuse of fertilizers, climate change, et cetera. We have sargassum coming into our beaches and otherwise messing with our ecosystems. We can use that sargassum to create things like packaging thanks to Notpla. And so turning waste to value, like we talked about. Really excited to have you here, Rodrigo. Thank you very much for everything you're doing at Notpla, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to share a bit what we do. I'm calling, as I mentioned, from London, where we have this company that is called Notpla, that stands for Not Plastic. And basically, just 50 meters from where I'm sitting now, this gentleman in 1866 invented plastic. So this is kind of like where I'm sitting at the moment, and the warehouse that is kind of like on the back. And in the warehouse on the front is where this material that it was called at that time Parkesine, because it was the last name of this gentleman, Charles Parker, come up as a first thermoplastic. A few decades later, other plastics like bakelite start to appear on the market. And nowadays, we use it for quite a lot of different things. We always say that plastic is a quite good material. It works really well. It's really cheap. It's really light. It has amazing properties in terms of barrier. But one of the superpowers that it's lasting really long is what it makes a bit of a difficult kind of like a scenario for this material to be used in single applications, because in terms of circularity or regeneration doesn't work too well. And some of the examples of this is how it adapts in microplankton, for example, or in our oceans or in our blood. And yeah, my background is nothing to do too much initially with the smaller scale. I used to work on plastic recycle at different scales, mostly kind of like on architectural scale, but as well trying to do toys. So I play a lot with plastic recycling in the past, and realized that after doing a lot of projects in South America, in India, in Europe, it was quite hard to make something that it was making a big impact. That's why we look at how nature could do this, and how, for example, a coconut is able to contain water and being this example of regeneration, that you can throw it away and a new coconut tree will grow with more coconuts. That's something that you cannot do with a plastic bottle. You cannot throw a plastic bottle and a new plastic bottle tree will grow with more plastic bottles. That's the ultimate kind of like goal of a packaging company. But we were able to create something that we call O, that is a seaweed-based membrane that can contain liquids in a really similar way to what nature does. So nature uses membranes because it's the most effective way. You need the less amount of material in a small scale, in medium scale, and in big scale. So nature used this. And this is a technique that we didn't invent it. It's a technique that had been used since the 1930s, so almost 100 years ago, to make things like fake caviar. And yeah, it's using seaweed. So there's different type of seaweed that you can use for this and other purposes. But like, yeah, it was mentioned sargassum. That is one of the biomass that I suppose is quite relevant nowadays, especially in tropical or subtropical kind of like areas. But at the moment we started using mostly back in the days kind of like local seaweed to us, that is seaweed from the Atlantic coast in Europe. So it's mostly France, United Kingdom, Norway, a bit the north of Spain. And the advantage of seaweed is that you can eat it, but if you don't eat it, nature will know how to eat it really fast. So you can see here on the right-hand side of the screen, some of our materials disappearing in a small period of time, almost faster than an orange peel, faster than cardboard. And what you see on the left-hand side is either a multi-layer sachet or what is called compostable plastics that in these conditions will never go away. We started not with the ambition of making a company, but with the ambition of just trying to replace plastic. And we were doing dinners where we buy in plastic and repackage it, inviting friends for dinner. And then iterating on this membrane through feedback. And people were saying, you cannot close it back. And you cannot close back an orange neither, but it's functional because you can have segments, for example. We licensed the first recipe under Creative Commons, so a lot of people could replicate this recipe. And that had quite a lot of kind of like success. A lot of people started to replicate this recipe at home. And that gave us a bit of boost. Like we got a few prizes to kind of like push forward. We make this joke, we didn't win all these prizes. You can see my face of disappointment here on the right-hand side after losing a big check. But we use that traction to kind of like put together a team of scientists back in Imperial College in London almost 10 years ago to start to look at these properties. We raised some money as well to start to make machines a couple of years later. And with this money, we have this vision of no one nowadays can make plastic at home, but you could make seaweed packaging and you can industrialize that in a small scale. So that was the vision. This was the reality. And we continue our journey of making different iterations of machine to the point that, well, nowadays we have learned that as a company, it's quite hard to make machines ourselves. So we're not doing machines anymore. We left that to a German machine manufacturer who is much better at making machines than us. And we transformed what used to be a sausage machine to make our products made out of seaweed. And with these machines, we had been able to do quite a lot of different products and different type of uses. And we distribute those products in the same way that you can distribute fruits. So we started with things like events, like festivals, marathons, and then we ramp it up. Could you give me this is maybe lagging. Could you give me a thumbs up if you can see the video? Great, it's lagging a bit. Yeah, perfect. So hopefully that gives a bit of an example of things that we have done. So we have done the London Marathon with this product, where we replace 46,000 bottles. We have done, or we are ramping up now towards doing the Olympics in France this summer with Decathlon, energy. Well, it's a sports retailer, but they have energy. We have done Decathlon. We have done Roland Garros. We had a bar. We have done alcohol. We have done vending machines, juices, sauces. But we always kind of, I think, how nature does it. So sometimes we try to twist a bit the shape and the form of this product. So for example, for olive oil, we have a little pipette. So it's a bit more functional. So you can control a bit how you dosage the product. For toothpaste, we have a mini. It's like a little blueberry. So you can take as many as you need for your weekend, and you can use it in different ways. You can put it all at once, or you can just squish it. And through this process, we started to get to know quite a lot of different companies. One of them, called Just Eat, is the takeaway packaging company leader in Europe. So it's a bit like Uber Eats or Delivery Hero in the US. And it was COVID, so all the events, they were quite quiet, as you can imagine. And they asked us, oh, could you look at a problem for us? That is the plastic that is inside of the takeaway boxes. So similar to coffee cups, takeaway boxes, they need to have a plastic in order to prevent the water and the grease of the food to enter into the cellulose fiber. And this is a problem because once you have plastic into the paper, you cannot recycle the paper and you cannot recycle the plastic. So even if the consumer, they think, oh, I'm buying a cardboard packaging, that's not true because it contains quite a lot of plastic. And this is a bit what we have been doing. We have been putting the seaweed as a liner, as a protecting layer for food. And this is a bit what we had been doing. So basically, we get seaweed. In this case, it's seaweed from France. We wash it, and then we apply it using existing equipment this time. So this is a factory that used to make stamps up in Manchester. And basically, we make a waterfall of seaweed, and paper pass at really fast speeds, so almost 200 meters per minute. And then we can convert that into takeaway boxes that we use across different type of channels. Mostly we started with sport events again, so football or soccer. In Europe, we do all the Champions League, and we are doing in a couple of weeks Wimbledon, the tennis tournament, and we are replacing as well packaging on canteens. And the advantage is that you can recycle the paper, or if it goes with the food waste, you can compost it. And we can go across the supply chain, so we can sell final products or just the raw material. This is some of the pictures of the operations. And now we are present in quite a lot of different stadiums, mostly in Europe, but we started as well in the Portland Blazers. We did the first game without plastic, which had been quite exciting. And we are at the moment testing as well in the US how we can manufacture this, because as you can imagine, it doesn't make too much sense to ship packaging around. Other things that we are working that at the moment are not commercialized, but we are working quite a lot with flexible films. So flexible films means making films that can be used for different packaging applications, but things like soluble films in different forms or shapes, detergent pots. So basically the film that at the moment detergents has is plastic. So we're trying to find a solution for that. Different functionality. And then a couple of other things that we are into our own circularity. So out of the seaweed, there is a lot of fiber. So we use the hydrocolloid part, the extract, to make these upper part products that we just share. And the rest is a quite green fiber that contains a lot of cellulose. So we started to make our own seaweed paper in order to regularize this biomass. And at the moment, we make this paper with 30% seaweed fiber and 70% recycled fiber that we distribute across different channels, but these customers who buy them and make their own packaging. And the latest things that we have been doing is compressing this fiber. So basically, initially making just a rigid product, like you could see it almost kind of like waste product, which had this amazing ability that you could dissolve it. And we have done a couple of things. We did this project with a luxury watch brand where you could dissolve the watch box after you receive it. So there's no after you put the watch in your wrist, you don't need the box, so you can kind of like get rid of it. And at the moment we are pelletizing this in order to try to make things like cutlery or other kind of like rigid materials. And yes, as well, kind of like the focus of today a bit is circularity and regeneration. Couple of examples of other products that we have been doing a bit more tailored. So sometimes when we work with clients, we not only ask them like what type of packaging they want to get rid of in terms of plastic, but if they have anything else in terms of waste, that at the moment is a linear circle that we can integrate and we can make into a circular system. In this case, it's a company of almonds, and on the almonds, they have the shells that they can sell. There's not a problem, but they have the skins that at the moment is organic waste. So we have been integrating that into our own packaging. So in this case, it's almost almonds packaged on almonds. Same thing we have done with cherry stalks. So we can convert that into kind of like rigid and flexible packaging, and that has been some of the circularity kind of like place that we have been putting into the game. We are a team at the moment of 55 people working on the intersection of material science, seaweed sourcing, design, business development. As it was mentioned, we were quite honored to win this big prize called the Airshot Prize. That is one of the biggest recognitions that we have. It's given by, well, it was given by Prince William, and David Beckham gave us the award, and it came with quite a lot of support from the Prince himself. He had become a bit of our business developer, so he had been selling our boxes in food trucks, in his stadium, and been a really good advocate. And I think that's kind of it. I just wanted to open the floor for questions, and thank everyone.
Thank you, Rodrigo. It's so exciting. You could see the questions and comments coming up as people were getting so excited about what this means for our plastic challenge. And certainly that's how I felt when I first heard about you guys. But what I got really excited about was a little thing, kind of you commented on the side about how you're looking in the United States for potential manufacturing. And given what I know about Mobile, about the port, about the linkage to rail, and about the importance of the Southeast region as a good spot for manufacturing, just was curious kind of where you are in that process or what you're looking for. Just as we think about building new opportunities for innovative businesses to be attracted to the Mobile region, what are the things that you look for?
Sure. So at the moment, we are looking for demand initially, and then out of that demand to try to build the supply chain step by step. There are different steps in the supply chain, and there are existing partners. So if we start by the end, like normally to have, for example, a packaging in a stadium, there is a company who has the food service contract to that stadium. And that food service company kind of like have the say on what type of packaging there is used. We have quite a lot of push of the stadiums themselves. So like the clubs themselves or the owners, they say, oh, I want to use NotPlan. That really helps because then it's a bit of a cascade down. Then the person who buys the packaging, they have normally a contract with a packaging distributor who they normally kind of like get the packaging from a converter. A converter is a person who makes the boxes. So we are working with different converters as well in the US. Mostly in the US, as we started a bit on the Portland Blazers, thanks to the owner of the Portland Blazers, who was really kind of like, oh, I want to have that not playing our things. We're starting now as well, like kind of like around New York. We have a lot of kind of like push from Bloomberg and other kind of like clients who are ordering NotPla. But I think coming back to mobile and everything that is happening around the area, I think we're looking for obvious kind of like existing manufacturing places where plastic is at the moment transformed. We learned through the hard way that like it's hard to be completely vertically integrated. So at the moment we're not trying to replace plastic or the supply chain of plastic as a whole, but try to integrate our material into the existing supply chain of plastic to try to scale up faster. So we are looking into places where plastic is used in different kind of like scales to try to input a more sustainable input. So it's not, instead of crude oil, to start with kind of like crude seaweed, let's put it that way, and then kind of like going through the refinement process. That again, if I was kind of like jumping, there is the conversion, there is the coating, there's the paperboard, there is a transformation of the material. So there's quite a lot of steps. So at the moment, we're quite open. We are doing a first trial with a packaging company that we found near Atlanta. in terms of like converting and making the coating, but we are super open to kind of like different avenues. And especially what you were mentioning of being in a coastal community that has a lot of like biomass, like in this case sargassum, we believe that like a problem to a certain extent in certain regions could be an opportunity in terms of revalorization and extraction of this biomass for other type of uses like packaging.
Excellent, thank you. And there's also a historical timber industry in the region, as well as the potential other pieces of this. So it'll be interesting to explore if there's an opportunity there to kind of that unique combination of what you talked about of demand and supply. So as well as the intermediaries who are doing the conversions and manufacturing. So we'll circle back to you on that for sure. So the questions we had, the first one was from, let's see, the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program was asking if your seaweed is farmed or gathered, and do you manage any aquaculture production yourselves?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we are not vertically integrated. We don't have boats, or we have, or we collaborate quite closely with different seaweed farms. So for example, a couple of people in the team, they own seaweed farms themselves. And we as NotPla, we have been kind of like supporting and investing in the small projects of seaweed farms across like regions. We have a few partnerships with some of the biggest seaweed farms as well. So one big seaweed farm that is in Indonesia, they have the first seaweed tractors that collects seaweed in a really kind of like automatic and efficient way. Because in most of the other seaweed farms, you kind of like chop it. Seaweed can be farm or harvest, and there's different ways of harvesting seaweed. It's a bit like saying agriculture, right? Or forestry. And you can do beach cast. So basically that's kind of like when the seaweed arrives to the coast, you have to collect it and dry it before kind of like it gets rotten, because it gets rotten quite quickly. And
Yes.
on that case, in different regions, they manage this biomass in different ways. Some cases they pay for the seaweed to be collected. In other cases, it's a bit the other way around. Try to do this in the most kind of like sustainable way as possible, and try to adapt to every type of circumstance and every type of region, because we understand that it's not our say, it's like what the context says.
Yeah.
And what was the other question? I don't know if I missed something there.
No, you answered the question there.
Okay.
And let's see, Jennifer asked, does it have a taste or consistency when you put it in your mouth, the little packets?
Yeah, so we remove all the taste. Seaweed is used for different applications, and one of them is food. So already kind of like when you have seaweed and maybe you don't realize in a yogurt or in toothpaste or in beer, that's kind of like part of the seaweed that is used as a thickener in most cases. It doesn't have any taste. So we use some of those learnings to kind of like use or take out the part that have the taste and the odor and the color. So it's quite inodor, and it has definitely a texture. So it's a bit like gelatin texture without being gelatin, what you have in your mouth, and you can make it thinner or thicker depending on the type of application. So in the cases that you're going to eat it, it's important that we make it quite thin, but it's a bit like a fruit. It's like we have at the moment the resistance normally to want to benchmark it is a cherry tomato or a grape. It's like around 20-30 newtons of force. Much harder than that, it could kind of like be a bit of a choke wrist, or it could kind of be harder, but at the same time, it's much more resistant.
John asked, will other plants work? I know you're focused on seaweeds, but will other plants, water hyacinths, invasives, thinking about other trouble?
Sure. Yeah. So we are working with quite a lot of kind of like exploring different biomass. I put the example of the skins of the almonds. We are looking quite closely at the moment of the skins of tomatoes. It's interesting because like on tomatoes, there's quite a lot of waste, like to make ketchup or to make kind of like tomato passata, all the skins get discarded. And surprise, surprise, the skins have quite a lot of biomass that is really good to contain things like ketchup, because it's how nature kind of like does it in a really efficient way. So we are trying to get some of that to try to combine it sometimes with seaweed to adapt our barrier properties for the content.
Right, that's so exciting. Pam asked, how long does it take for the rigid materials to biodegrade or compost?
So it depends quite a lot on the conditions. So as I share, almost if you put it on water, it's almost not instant, but it disappears really quickly. That's sometimes a challenge, right? Because if you want to put a spoon in your soup, you don't want the spoon in the soup to kind of like you take it out of the soup and there is no spoon. So you have to find a compromise between how much pressure, how much hydrocolloid, how much fiber you put, and find a bit like what is the right balance. We believe again that like we are here to replace single dose. So we are trying to maximize for thinking how we can disappear fast, because we believe like if we wanted to last super long, things like metal or aluminum or ceramics or glass or plastic, it works really well. So we are trying to see what is kind of like the minimum amount of time that you need to have a spoon in a soup to be able to eat the soup and not to disappear that fast. So it's a bit on at the moment it becomes, we don't have the solution yet. The spoons that I share on the screen, they become a bit like magician spoons once you put the water.
Yes.
So they're quite good for pranks, but nothing else. We are starting with things like ice cream and other type of contents that they're a bit easier because they're not that liquid. And then hopefully kind of like as the technology develop, one thing that we are really firm in NOPLA, and not all there's quite a lot of seaweed companies who decided to take the route of like mixing their material with plastic to be able to achieve those objectives, and then kind of like trying to go then. For us, as is in our name, that we are not plastic,
Right.
we have this really clear red line that we don't want to compromise, even if the application or the user experience is not at the moment kind of like the expected from a plastic product. But yeah, it's proven that like our material is natural, it's not plastic. Therefore, you
Yes.
need to find this balance.
As I recall, you all were the first packaging product that was certified zero plastic in the EU. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, correct. So in the European Union, there is this single-use plastic directive that had been by certain governments kind of like taken really seriously, defines really well what is a plastic and what is not a plastic. In order not to be a plastic, you need to be abundant in nature and seaweed is, and you need to be not chemically modified. And that's a bit the challenge. Some companies on the seaweed space, they take the seaweed and then chemically modify it to convert it into plastics.
Oh,
It is depending what you're trying to do, but like it lasts much longer because it's a plastic
yes.
for the good and the bad, right? Like it must last longer in terms of like shelf life, or certain applications are more stable. But on the bad side of things, like nature, once it's in a plastic form, don't know how to deal with it in the same way that if it was natural. Similar to what happens with other type of compostable plastics like PLA that sometimes come from starch, from corn, or from potato, that those are natural materials, but they are chemically modified to make a polymer that is a plastic.
Yes.
So once they are in that form, it's not natural anymore, and nature doesn't have the tools to kind of like break down that polymer. For the good and the bad. Again, you can protect things for a long time because nature cannot attack it,
Right.
but cannot reintegrate it back into the system as quickly.
Thank you. So Eliza asked, what are the primary challenges when transitioning from plastic to seaweed-based materials? And I can imagine there's challenges across manufacturing to actually consumer acceptance. So what are the biggest challenges there?
Sure, correct. It depends on, so at the moment, the society that we live in is completely plastified, right? Like in the way that we buy, the way that we consume, the timelines of like supply chains. So sometimes it's quite hard to go with something that is not plastic. The investment that like the current big companies have done into plastic capex in terms of like facilities and how many years they need to use these facilities in order to amortize. So it's quite hard to, when you talk with some of these companies, if you don't have a material that is like plastic in terms of like it works in the same machine, costs the same, has the same properties, it's like, what you are asking for plastic. It's really hard to kind of like plastic didn't have that challenge of like become aluminum or become like you are asking a material to become a plastic. So that's one of them. Plastic is done at the moment at a really big scale, so it's really hard sometimes to compete in terms of like cost or like optimization. It has a few decades of technological development behind them, so like and there's a lot of people making a lot of money at the moment with the current status quo, which is sometimes quite a big force to be able to fight against. At the same time, I think we have seen in the latest kind of like few years, a lot of people are conscious of this problem. Sometimes we call it like we're in the new plasticine era, right? Like we have plastic everywhere nowadays.
Yes.
So we are quite conscious of that challenge, and I think we're getting together in different ways every one of us to try to find alternatives.
Great. Well, yes, it's one of the planetary boundaries now that we're breaking with all the plastic invasion into our systems. You know, people talk about the future of the energy, oil and gas companies, and one of the areas is, of course, have them invest in new clean energy options. But another opportunity is for them to diversify from their plastics industry, which is, of course, an output from the oil and gas industry. So I get excited about kind of legacy interests investing in the new innovative spaces. And so we're running out of time. We have like a minute. So I was curious if you've seen any of the existing kind of plastic manufacturers or oil and gas companies investing in innovators like you to diversify into the next generation of their products. And then we had a question about any concerns about any contamination in the seaweed resulting in the product, mercury, arsenic, et cetera. And then finally, we had one around which are the key species. So if you can kind of pull all those together, I don't want to keep us over too.
Like really quickly, let's see. There are 72,000 different species. There is three main families: red, brown, and green. We normally use red, that comes a bit from warmer countries, and green, or brown, sorry, that grows a bit more in colder countries. We try to remove, as I mentioned, everything that is related with kind of like taste, flavor, but as well all the things that they are kind of like or could be nasty. That normally all the seaweeds are edible. The only nasty things that comes are nasty things that humans have put there. So it's interesting because like seaweed becomes a bit of a sink to those things. And the latest question that you had in terms of like, we have received investment of big petroleum companies. So the answer at the moment is no. We are trying to talk at the moment with big companies that are in the plastic space to try to switch and to try to partner with them. But sometimes it's not easy due to the scale and the reasons that we just mentioned before.
Sure. Well, I'm really hopeful that you all will get the continued investment and demand. I know you'll have the supply when it comes to sargassum and just the incredible productivity of the oceans and seaweed. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And for everything that you're doing to help to convert this problem into an opportunity. And I also wanted to thank everybody for joining us and to encourage you to join us for our next webinar, which is going to be on Innovators for Nature, on nature-based solutions, June 25th at the same time. We're going to have 3 companies, one of which is doing scaled restoration of seagrasses, which are so important, using robotics. We have an ocean climate restoration company working with carbon sequestration called Vesta, which is doing mineral carbon sequestration with nature. And then we have Allotrope Partners, who's converting cellulosic biomass into low carbon ethanol and renewable natural gas. So some really innovative approaches of turning nature into solutions. And again, please join me in thanking this incredible panel, and thank you to Henry and Roberta for your leadership, and look forward to collaborating with everyone as we go forward. Thank you so much.